My daughter-in-law pushed me into the lake. I begged her to help me, but she just laughed and said, "Don't be so dramatic." A few weeks later, she was the one on her knees at my front door, begging, "I'm glad you're here. Stay until the end and tell me what city you're watching my story from. I want to know how far it has reached." Today was a barbecue at my son Kevin's house. I was up and in the kitchen early, before the crack of dawn, 5 o'clock on the dot. The meat was still frozen, the vegetables unwashed, the sauce unmade. I tied on my apron and started without a word. Sometimes you learn that asking for help is just another way of exposing yourself to indifference. I walked through the living room with the cutting board in my hands. Jessica, my daughter-in-law, was sprawled on the sofa, swiping her finger across her phone, as if the world owed her something. She didn't even say good morning. "Everything okay, Jessica?" I asked in a low voice. She barely looked up. "Yep, all good, thanks." Not another word. On the other armchair, Kevin was snoring with his mouth open. He was still wearing the same wrinkled t-shirt from yesterday, the one he wore to the supermarket, which already had a sauce stain on the chest. I stopped for a moment, watching him sleep. He looked so distant, as if I wasn't the woman who carried him on her back when he had a fever and we couldn't even afford the bus fare to the hospital. I went out to the backyard. The sun wasn't beating down yet, but you could already feel the heat. I set up the tables, one by one. I pulled the plastic chairs out of the corner. Some were dusty, others had cobwebs, and I started wiping them down with a damp cloth. Then, I spread out the tablecloths I embroidered myself last year, with little red and blue flowers. I wanted it to look nice, even if no one noticed the details. That's how so many of us mothers are. We do things out of habit, not for applause. Matthew, my grandson, was sitting a few feet away, headphones on, a video game controller in his hand. "Good morning, honey," I said, smiling. He didn't even look at me. He just kept mashing buttons as if I were a ghost. "Matthew," I repeated, "can you help me put out the glasses? I'm in the middle of a game, Grandma." "Not right now." And that was it. As if right now were a promise the wind would carry away. In the kitchen, I cut the watermelon into thick slices, picked out the seeds with a knife, and arranged them on a clay platter. Jessica came in, grabbed a bottle of white wine, and as she passed, she glanced at the platter with disdain. "Couldn't this look a little nicer? I mean, at least in even triangles." "Sorry, I'll fix it," I said without looking at her. "It's just that we have important people coming over, Mom." She calls me Mom when she needs something or when she wants to sound polite in front of others. The guests started to arrive. Young people, expensive clothes, sweet perfume that stung your nose like a bee sting. I didn't know most of them. Jessica's friends, surely. I greeted them with a nod. No one nodded back. A woman with big glasses and wine-colored nails approached Jessica and, pointing at me, asked in a low voice, but not that low, "Is she the cleaning lady?" Jessica let out a short laugh. "Oh, don't start. Instead, tell me, have you seen the new garden lights?" She didn't correct her. She didn't defend me. She just erased me with a smile. The grill started to smoke. I stood in front of it, flipping the meat over and over. Someone had to make sure it didn't burn. I put ice in the pitchers, brought out more plates when they started running out. No one offered me a seat. No one said, "You should sit down, too. You've done so much." Meanwhile, Jessica was talking loudly, surrounded by her friends. "This restaurant is my baby, literally. I did everything myself. Finding the location, decorating it, talking to suppliers, and the financing." Someone asked, "Oh, that just happened. You know, things fall into place when you make moves." Right then, I felt like I'd been swallowed whole, as if I'd been dragged to the bottom of the lake behind the backyard. Because the truth is that it just happened was my life's savings. The money I'd kept in envelopes, the money I'd saved by selling pound cakes at Christmas. I finished arranging the watermelon on nicer plates, according to Jessica, and stepped away from the noise. I walked toward the lake. I sat on a rock, the towel still draped around my neck, feeling the heat run down my back like drops of resignation. Suddenly, Jessica appeared with her wine glass in hand. "Mom, why don't you get in the water for a bit, like you used to? Didn't you say you were a good swimmer?" I barely turned, a half smile on my face. That was years ago, dear. I don't have the same strength in my arms. Come on. "A little dip won't hurt. Look, like this," she said. And before I could understand, I felt a hard shove in my back. The water was ice cold. It rushed into my nose, my mouth, my ears. I swallowed, I kicked, I searched for the bottom but couldn't find it. I couldn't feel my legs. My right arm wasn't responding. For a moment, I thought I was really going to sink. But I grabbed a piece of floating wood. I clung to it with my other hand and managed to get my head above water. Up there, she was just standing there. "Don't be so dramatic," she said. "You know how to swim." She didn't scream. She didn't get help. She didn't come closer. From a distance, I saw Kevin, chatting with some guys. He was laughing. He didn't even look my way. Matthew was still on his phone. I later found out he was live streaming it, with the title, "My Grandma Almost Drowned, lol." I pulled myself to the shore as best I could. Everything hurt. The mud made me slip. My knee was scraped. My dress clung to my body like a trap. I climbed out like a drowned dog. When I looked up, Jessica was already turning away, drinking what was left in her glass. I turned. Kevin let out a loud laugh. I don't know if it was at something someone said, but it hurt just the same. I walked, soaking wet, through the living room, as if no one else was there. Water dripped from my dress onto the floor in slow drops, one after another, marking a rhythm that only I seemed to hear. Each step left a darker footprint on the tiles. No one asked a thing. Matthew, on the couch, was still glued to his phone. "Okay, Grandma," I heard him say without lifting his head. But he wasn't talking to me. He said it to the air, like someone commenting on a video. Then, one of Jessica's friends, a young man in a tight shirt with a mocking smile, pointed toward the door and blurted out, "Did she really fall? How clumsy, poor thing." And everyone laughed. Jessica, without even turning around, answered from the center of the group. My mother-in-law is just like that. So dramatic. I'm sure she was exaggerating. She can swim, you know. I pressed my lips together. I didn't say anything. I walked straight to the guest bathroom, the only bathroom I could use without them looking at me like I was in the way. I opened the door carefully. The light flickered before turning on. The walls smelled damp, and the tile was as cold as my back. I locked the door, leaned against it, and let out a sigh I'd been holding in for a while. The mirror in front of me returned a reflection I didn't want to look at for long. My hair plastered to my scalp, my arms bruised from the fall, my eyes, they weren't angry, no, they were tired, as if that face had already given up on expecting anything from anyone. I slowly took off my wet dress, as if it were someone else's skin, one that no longer fit me. Each piece of clothing I removed felt like a layer of disappointment peeling away. The wet bra, the muddy sandals, the underwear that weighed me down like a stone. I looked through the towels on the shelf. They were rough, old, almost like sandpaper. I wrapped one around myself and opened the small cabinet under the sink. There, among lidless jars and half-empty bottles, I found a box where an old sweater was still stored. It belonged to Frank. He'd folded it and left it there before he died, just in case it gets cold one day. He'd told me back then. I hugged it for a second. It smelled of closets and time. I put it on. It was a little frayed at the neck, with little pills of wool on the sleeves. But I didn't care. I felt covered, no longer naked before their laughter. I left the bathroom without looking at anyone. I walked down the hall and into the room where I keep my things. I opened the dresser with the keys from the back, took out the envelope I had kept for years. It was still there. The bank receipt for the transfer made out to Jessica. $75,000. I touched the paper. The numbers were still clear. The date, I had signed it myself, with a trembling hand. The day after she had cried in the kitchen saying her dream was to open a restaurant, that it would be the only thing to give her life meaning. I remembered every extra hour at the pharmacy, the weekends selling pound cakes and scarves at the town square, the nights with swollen feet and cracked hands from washing so many dishes, all to save that money. And in that moment, with the paper between my fingers, I felt a sour taste rise in my throat. I put the envelope back. I closed the drawer firmly. I didn't cry. By that point, my tears had dried up. I left the room and crossed the living room again. No one saw me. It was as if I were invisible, or worse, as if I had never been there. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of hot water. I wanted something to calm the trembling in my hands. From the backyard, Jessica's voice carried, clearly like a knife, "My mother-in-law is tough. That woman doesn't die easy, huh?" Laughter. I sat at the very edge of the table, right at the corner, The same table I had sanded and varnished myself when they moved in. I touched the edge of the tablecloth I embroidered last year with my fingertip, with thread Diane brought back for me from her trip. No one had noticed it. No one sits with me there. Then I heard another voice. Matthews this time. Check this out, Mom. I edited it with music.hahah. Oh my God, that's horrible. You're such a jerk. But look at her flailing. It looks like a meme. I stood up. I peeked without being seen. Matthew had his phone in his hand. He was showing Jessica a video. It was me, struggling in the water, my face contorted in fear, my dress floating, and a little tune in the background, like circus music. Everyone was laughing. One of the guests even said, "Did you post it yet? That's gonna go viral." And there, in that instant, something inside me broke. Not with a crash, not with tears. It was like a silent crack, a clean break. Like when a beloved cup shatters and you just stare at the pieces, knowing it can never be put back together. I thought, blood isn't always family, and silence isn't always peace. I went back to the kitchen. I sat down again, as if the world was still spinning, and I no longer had a part in it. No one looked for me. No one asked if I was okay. I sat in the corner of the kitchen, the same chair that's always empty, at the end of the table, where no one wants to sit because you can't see the TV from there. I hunched over a little. The sweater was still damp on the inside. The wool, heavy with water, stuck to my back as if to remind me of what had happened just a few hours before. I felt the cold seep into my bones, up my spine, to the center of my chest. Outside, the music was booming. Jessica had turned up the volume like it was a nightclub party. The laughter mixed with the thumping bass, and I heard a couple of happy shouts. They were dancing in the backyard, right where Frank and I once dreamed of planting rose bushes. Through the window, I saw one of Jessica's friends dancing barefoot, a glass in her hand. Jessica followed, spinning as if everything was fine, as if she hadn't thrown her mother-in-law into the water just a little while ago, as if this house hadn't been built with my effort, too, because I helped build this home. I remembered the day Kevin came to my house with Jessica. She was still his girlfriend. They hadn't been together long. They sat in the living room, nervous, and told me they wanted to get married, but they had no money. They didn't know how they would start. I went to my room, opened the little box where I kept my wedding jewelry, my ring, the earrings Frank gave me for our 10th anniversary, and the few dollars I had been saving for an emergency. I went to the pawn shop and sold everything. With that, and a small loan, we made the down payment on this house. We'll never forget this, Mom, Jessica told me back then, her eyes teary. Don't you worry, I told them. The important thing is that you start off on the right foot. And now, from the kitchen, I heard Jessica telling a friend, as they flipped through a decorating magazine, "Honestly, I'm so sick of this house. It's old, dark, poorly laid out. So why don't you move?" The other one asked, "I'm looking at options. I can't stand sharing a space with that woman anymore. She suffocates me." I stayed still. I pretended to read the ingredients on a box of chicken bouillon. I didn't want them to see me, didn't want to interrupt. I just wanted to understand at what point I became the burden everyone pretended not to see. But the truth is, now that I think about it, they kicked me out of their lives a long time ago. I just didn't want to accept it. I cooked dinner every day, without fail. Sometimes limping, other times with aching hands. That night I made pulled pork sandwiches, because I know they're Matthew's favorite. It took me hours, marinating the meat, preparing the red onions, warming the buns by hand so they wouldn't fall apart. I put the plates on the table. Number 1 said a thing. Not a looks good, not a thanks, Grandma. Nothing. Kevin sat across from Jessica. "So what happened with the permit for the restaurant?" he asked, not looking at his plate. "Almost there. The lawyer is slow, but it's almost done." Jessica chewed quickly, as if she were in a hurry. "By the way, Mom, can you help me with the dishes later? I'm swamped with everything for tomorrow." She said it without looking at me, as if I were an employee, as if what she had just eaten hadn't been made with my own hands. "Of course," I replied. What else could I say? When everyone was finished, they all got up as if it were the most normal thing in the world. Matthew went up to his room. Kevin stayed to watch TV. Jessica went into her room to check her email on the laptop. I cleared the plates. I washed every single one. The hot water stung my fingers. My legs ached. Everything ached. I went up to my room. I locked the door. I sat on the edge of the bed, still in the damp sweater. I didn't even have the strength to take it off. From downstairs, I could hear laughter. Light, carefree laughter. Then I heard Matthew's voice, clear, as if he had shouted it in my ear. It's just that my grandma is always meddling. She breaks everything. It's so frustrating. I covered my mouth with my hand. I didn't want to sob to escape. Not a single tear. And still, I cried. Silently. The way women cry when they're tired of begging for love where there is only habit. I looked around. The room I sleep in has peeling paint. The ceiling has water stains. But to me, it was a safe place. At least, I thought it was. I turned to the window. From there, I could see the front yard, where Frank had planted jasmine, where we used to spend afternoons drinking coffee while listening to the neighbors chat. Now, all that was left was a broken pot. The soil was parched, and a few dry branches. No one had bothered to pick up. I thought, things you care for with love, if they fall into the wrong hands, they turn to dust. I laid down, not to sleep, but to endure. Sometimes you don't rest your body, you rest your soul. After everything that had happened, I stopped talking. Not with words, at least. I limited myself to being present, like the air between the walls, like the hum of the refrigerator at night. No one hears it. But it's there. One morning, before the sun was fully up, I grabbed the main set of house keys, the ones Jessica always wants to have under her control, and hid them behind a package of frozen peas in the back of the freezer. I wanted to see how long it would take them to notice. Has anyone seen the keys? Jessica asked, an hour later, from the living room. You had them yesterday, didn't you? Kevin answered, without much interest. Well, yeah, but now, they're gone, and I have to leave. I heard her walking all over the house, opening drawers, checking purses. She even went to the bathroom. She was annoyed, chewing the air between her teeth. I was still in the kitchen, chopping an onion, as if nothing was wrong. Did you check the freezer? I asked her calmly. The freezer? What would they be doing in there? Sometimes you get confused, I said as I walked to the fridge. With this age thing, everything gets a little jumbled for me. I reached in, moved the packages, pulled out the bag of peas, and there they were. The keys, cold as the truth. Here they are. I'm so strange, aren't I? I smiled at her. Jessica looked at me with narrowed eyes. She didn't say anything, but her gaze scanned me from head to toe, as if she were trying to figure out how much I knew, or how much I was pretending. Kevin, meanwhile, didn't even bother. He just poured more coffee and said under his breath, well, at least they turned up. The next day, I turned on the stove without putting anything on it. I left the empty pot on the burner, as if I were going to boil water. I went to my room for a while. The smell of something burning drifted up to me. It wasn't much, but enough to be unsettling. Jessica was the first to notice. What is that smell? She yelled. She ran into the kitchen and turned off the flame. She looked at the blackened, scorched pot. She stood there for a moment, arms crossed, then shot down the hall. Kevin, she called. This can't go on. Your mother is not well. Did you see the pot? She left it on the stove. She could have started a fire. Jessica, he replied from the couch. No, Kevin, don't say Jessica like I'm overreacting. Your mother is losing her memory. First the keys. Now this. We can't live like this. I listened from the stairs, where no one could see me. That night, I took out a new notebook. I put it on my nightstand and started to write. Day 2 left the pot on the stove. They said nothing about my health. They only talked amongst themselves. Every time someone ignored me or pretended nothing was wrong, I drew a vertical line. In the margin of the page, in just a few hours, I already had several lines like walls, each one a piece of evidence. I no longer spoke aloud, but I wrote. That same night, I heard them in their room. I'm not one to eavesdrop, but the half-open door and the thin walls don't help. I don't know what we're going to do. Kevin, Jessica said, sounding tired, if your mom is really losing it, we have to make a decision. What do you want me to do? He replied lazily. There are places that can take care of her, good places. Do you have any idea how much a private nursing home costs? Well, start looking, because I can't do this anymore. I clenched my fists until my nails dug into my palms. I bit my lip until I tasted metal. I didn't cry, but my blood was boiling. I got into bed without a sound. I closed my eyes. I started to plan. The next day, during dinner, I pretended to be more distracted. In the middle of a sentence, I stopped. I fell silent, staring at my plate as if I couldn't remember what I was saying. "What's wrong, Mom?" Kevin asked. "Oh, I can't remember anymore," I replied, and let my spoon fall. It made a soft sound, but it was enough. Jessica watched me. She said nothing. She just turned her head toward Kevin and gave a subtle nod. A short, dry gesture, as if to say, "See, what did I tell you?" After dinner, I went up to my room. I opened the notebook and wrote, "When they think you're weak, that's when they show you who they really are." I sat on the edge of the bed. I thought of Frank, of what he would say if he saw me like this. He would probably put a hand on my shoulder and tell me, "Nobody erases you. Maria, remember who you are." And I remembered. That night I checked the stove 3 times. I went to the closet, opened the safe, and took out all the important papers, my birth certificate, the house documents, the transfer receipts. I made copies, put them in envelopes, stored the originals in my backpack, right under Frank's sweater. Before I went to sleep, I took a piece of paper and wrote a single sentence in pencil. I taped it to the mirror on my dresser. It's time to demand justice. And that night, I slept with my soul wide awake. A few days later, Jessica organized a dinner at the house for some investors. New friends, polished faces, shiny watches, people who spoke with loud voices and easy laughs. I found out about the gathering because I saw the ingredient list taped to the fridge door. "Mom, can you make your green chili stew for Saturday?" Jessica said in a rushed voice, without looking up from her phone. "The green one, the one you make so well." "Of course," I replied. I didn't ask who it was for. I could already guess. I prepared it just like always, tender pork, harmony, with episode from the patch still growing behind the laundry sink. From the kitchen, the steam from the stew rose slowly, as if it too was having trouble leaving. It took me half the day to make, but it didn't matter. It never mattered. Night came, and with it, the guests, elegant people, with big watches and loud voices. Shirts with crisp creases, leather wallets. They greeted Jessica with fake hugs and Kevin with phrases like, "Brother, great to see you." Me, nothing. They settled in the backyard, where they had set up string lights that hung like fireflies, white chairs, and tables with crystal glasses that I had washed myself. I stayed in the kitchen. I wasn't invited to sit down. No one told me I could come out. I stood by the sink, washing the dirty dishes as they came in, one by one, with my apron soaked and my hands wrinkled from the warm water. From where I stood, I could hear every word they said. The voices carried clearly, like clean knives. "And that lady?" a woman asked, between laughs. "Is that your mom?" Jessica let out a cackle and said, "I wish." "No, that's my mother-in-law." And they all laughed. One of them said, "Oh, well, she seems more like the woman who cooks here." I kept washing a glass, the sponge in one hand and my heart in my throat. Matthew appeared in the middle of the group. He had his phone in his hand, as always. Suddenly, he stood in front of everyone and started to act. He clutched his chest, pretended to cough, and flailed his arms like a madman. "Help, I'm drowning. Somebody help me," he said, laughing. "Look, I'm my grandma in the lake," he finished. The laughter erupted like fireworks. One of the guests clapped. Someone else told him, "Record that, Matthew. You have to post that." I squeezed the glass in my hand. It didn't break, but inside, I felt something that had been cracked for a long time finally shatter. They served the stew hot. They tasted it and praised it. "This is amazing," one said. "Of course," Jessica added. I told her exactly how I wanted it, and right then, I knew the wound was no longer bleeding. It was just burning. Afterward, Jessica stood up, her glass held high. "Friends, thank you for coming. I want to share some news. I'm about to open my second location." "Congratulations," they shouted. "It's all been thanks to my own effort," she continued. "I did it all, from scratch. Nobody gave me anything." Someone asked her, "Didn't your mother-in-law support you?" Jessica made a dismissive gesture with her hand. "Well, a little. But honestly, this has been my work, my vision. It always has been. A little," she said. As if $75,000 were a tip. As if years of caring for her son, cleaning the house, and cooking every day didn't count. As if I didn't exist. I looked at Kevin. He was there, in a corner, with a beer in his hand. He said nothing. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't look at me. He just looked down and stayed quiet. I stayed quiet too. I turned around and started drying dishes, one by one. From the kitchen window, I watched them move among the laughter, the toasts, the cell phone pictures. I saw my own reflection in the glass, a ghost behind the pane, a silhouette that no longer belonged in that house, even though I had helped build it. When it got late, everyone started to say goodbye. Some came inside to use the bathroom, others to get water. I slipped away without a sound. I went up the stairs, step by step, so as not to draw attention. I passed by Kevin and Jessica's room. The door was ajar. It wasn't that I stopped to listen. It's just that the house has a bad habit of echoing what you don't want to hear. "We can't go on like this," Jessica said, her voice low but firm. "You need to decide. I don't want your mother here forever. Give me time." Kevin answered, almost in a whisper. "I'm thinking. It's not easy. Thinking what? Waiting for her to die alone. Is that cheaper?" He didn't answer. I continued on my way. I closed my bedroom door. I sat on the bed. I opened my notebook. With a black pencil, I wrote a single line. "Today, my children officially erased me from their lives." And next to Kevin's name, I drew a red X large, firm, like the marks you put on envelopes you're never going to mail. I didn't cry, because that night, the sadness wasn't new. It was old, like a broken chair you keep sitting in out of habit, even though you know you're going to fall. I didn't close my eyes that night. I lay down for a while, yes, but with no intention of sleeping. The dehumidifier fan made a low, constant hum, as if it were breathing for me. The lamp on the nightstand flickered now and then. I thought about turning it off, but I didn't want to be in the dark. Not that night. I got up slowly. I went to the foot of the bed and knelt before the old cedar chest that Frank had made for me with his own hands when we were newly married. He had varnished the lid himself, put on sturdy hinges, and etched our names into the wood with small nails, F and M, 1983. The nails never loosened, and neither did the promises, until he was gone. I opened the chest. It smelled of dry dust, of memories locked away for too long. I took things out as if I were unfolding parts of my life. First, Kevin's marriage certificate, printed on paper that was already yellowed at the edges, with a coffee stain in the corner. I remember that ceremony, modest, in Aunt Stella's garden, with paper flowers and a 3-tiered cake I decorated, with fruit myself. Underneath, the deposit slips I had made for Jessica when she said she needed to heal her mind after all the stress. The first one, for $10,000. I sold the plot of land my father had left me in Texas. "I just need a break, Maria. If I don't get one, I'm going to collapse," she had told me, crying, one afternoon. She asked me with a broken voice, holding my hand as if it were hers. I later heard from a neighbor that she had gone to get a nose job and been years. I also found a letter. It was from Matthew's kindergarten principal, handwritten, in round script. "Thank you for covering Matthew's tuition. He is a very intelligent and well-behaved boy." That day, I was in my robe, cleaning windows, when they called to say that, if it wasn't paid, he would be expelled. Jessica was in Cancun. She asked me to cover the payment until her paycheck came in. She never paid me back, and I never mentioned it again. I made piles of the papers. On the left, the ones that no longer hurt. On the right, the ones that still burned. And at the bottom, I found it. The investment contract with the bank to open Jessica's restaurant. My signature was there, next to hers, and the bank's stamp, impeccable. $75,000, all my savings, handed over with no strings attached. I closed my eyes, not to cry, to keep from screaming. I got up, turned on the laptop. It took a while to boot up, as if it were tired. I searched through my emails for one Diane had sent me months ago. She, always so on top of everything, had told me about the Seed Fund, a program that supported working women who wanted to start businesses in the food industry. "By women, for women," the slogan said. I opened the donation form. My fingers trembled, not from doubt, but from restrained resolve. I filled in every box, name, anonymous, reason, so that other women can dream without having their souls ripped out in the process. I attached the receipts, and in the comments field, I wrote, "All of this money was donated with no expectation of being returned. May it grow where there is gratitude. Respectfully, an invisible woman." I clicked submit. The screen froze for a few seconds. Then a message appeared. "Your donation has been registered. Thank you for your generosity." I leaned back in the chair. I looked at the empty screen. I didn't feel empty. I felt relief. Almost on impulse, I picked up the phone and dialed Diane. I just wanted to tell her, to hear her voice. I wasn't planning anything else. Maria, is everything okay? She asked as soon as she answered. Not entirely, but better, I said. Did something happen to you? I needed to let go, and I did. Diane was silent for a few seconds. I'll be over early. How does that sound? I'll bring pastries and we can really talk. Yes, come, I'll make coffee. I hung up. I went to the window. I opened it. The early morning air touched my face. It wasn't cold, it was fresh. Like when you wash your hands after a dirty day. Like when you open the curtains after weeks of having everything closed up. I took a deep breath. I smelled the earth from the dry pots, the old pine from the fence, the wind coming from far away. I looked at the clock. Past 3. It didn't matter. I went to my nightstand. I took out a small envelope and put the documents I did want to keep inside. The others I put in a paper bag to tear up in the morning. What's no longer useful is just dead weight, and you can't be expected to carry other people's burdens. I sat on the bed, but I didn't lie down. I wanted my body to remember this moment, the one where I chose something different. Finally, in a low voice, to myself, I said, tomorrow, I'm making tea for me, not to serve, not to wait, for me. I smiled to myself. Women like me don't stop giving, but there comes a point where we learn to give to ourselves, too. Because if you've been a pillar, a doormat, a shadow, and a shield, at least once in your life, you deserve to be a root. It was just getting light when I heard the squeak of the screen door. I didn't need to look out the window. I knew it was Diane. Her footsteps always make the same sound, firm, decisive, as if instead of walking, she's carrying the answer to what you don't dare say out loud. Maria, she called from the kitchen. Are you up? I'm here. Heating the water, I answered, wearing my robe, my eyes puffy from lack of sleep. She came in like someone who already knows the way, with her big purse slung over her shoulder and a paper bag of pastries. I brought donuts, the kind you like, the vanilla glazed, she said, placing them on the table. But she also took out something else, a navy blue folder with a firm plastic edge. On top, a simple white business card. Peter Coleman, estate attorney. Was he the one who— Yes, my cousin Roger recommended him. Remember him? He works in legal affairs at City Hall. Peter is serious, discreet. He's already reviewed the papers for the house, the savings, everything. There's no problem. Diane didn't wait for my reaction. She sat down, took off her sweater, and said bluntly, enough is enough. Maria, it's time you put things in their place. You weren't born to be anyone's shadow. What if I regret it? I asked. Regret what? Demanding to be seen. Stopping living off their crumbs. I didn't say anything. I went to pour the tea. She took out the papers and slid them toward me as if they were mirrors. I sat across from her. I took a deep breath and started to read. On the first page was the new will. The house would not go to Kevin or Matthew. It would go directly to the Blossom House Shelter, a place that helps battered, abandoned women, the ones who often have only silence and fear for company. The savings I still had left, which weren't much but were clean, would be transferred as a permanent fund. What was already donated could not be recovered. I ran my hand over the page. It was warm, like my chest. Not cold, not hot, just firm. Are you sure? I asked. More than ever, Diane said. No one in that house deserves what you've given. Let them learn what it costs to forget someone who was always there. I was quiet for a moment. Do you think this is fair, Maria? What's fair isn't always pretty. Sometimes it hurts, but that doesn't make it unfair. I looked at the document again. I remembered everything I had kept silent about. Everything I had cleaned. Everything I had cooked without being hungry. Everything I had saved even when I had no more room, not even in my soul. When I helped Kevin pay for Matthew's birth, I didn't ask for anything, not even a thank you. I know, Diane replied. And that's a credit to you, but it doesn't tie you down. It's just, you know what I feel, like I'm betraying something. You're not betraying anyone, Maria. You're choosing yourself. After so many years of putting yourself last, I took the pen. The tip trembled slightly. I signed, firmly, without a doubt. Peter would arrive the following week with the official document. This was the draft, but for me, it was already a verdict. Diane closed the folder and poured herself more tea. Want some sugar? I offered. No, it's fine like this, she said. I don't want any more sweet things that only taste bitter. We sat in silence for a while. Not much more needed to be said. I opened the refrigerator, took out the milk. It was almost empty. I put a few drops in her cup. I don't hate them, Diane, I said quietly. I don't want to destroy their lives, and you're not. You're just taking it out of their hands. It never belonged to them. They just got used to having it. What if they're left with nothing? I murmured. And you, weren't you left with nothing, too? No respect, no voice, no hug. You didn't leave them alone, Maria. They let go of you years ago. Now you're just opening the door and walking out yourself. I'm not looking for revenge, of course not. But if we give justice the face of revenge, women like you will never achieve it, I sighed. The air I let out wasn't of sadness, it was of relief. I want to be able to sleep without wondering if I failed as a mother. You didn't fail, they failed as children. Diane took my hand, her eyes were moist. She didn't cry, but I did. Thank you for helping me. Thank you for trusting me. I swear, you are not alone. We hugged tightly. One of those hugs that loosens the knot in your throat, not because it unties it, but because you no longer have to swallow it. Before she left, she kissed me on the forehead. You're going to be okay, Maria. Maybe not today, but very soon. I know, and this time, I want to be okay for me, not for anyone else. I watched her walk down the hall, the same one we had run down together as girls when we used to sneak off to play with our dolls. This time, the game was over, but the alliance was still intact. I was left alone in the kitchen. The cup was still steaming. I went to the window. The bougainvillea I planted with Frank was in bloom. Some dry flowers hung like wounds, but the rest, it was vibrant, fuchsia, strong, alive. And I thought, as only a woman who has lived enough can think, not everything that leaves dies. Sometimes it just changes owners, and sometimes what stays can also be saved. That day, I didn't smile out of habit. I did it because, for the first time in years, I felt like I belonged to myself. I didn't need to set an alarm that night. My body woke me up on its own before the neighbor's rooster. I sat on the edge of the bed, my feet dangling, and took a deep breath. Not out of habit, but to give myself courage. I took the suitcase I had pulled from the closet days earlier. It wasn't big, just a small one with wheels. I opened the drawers in silence. I folded my gray sweater, the one Frank always said made me look younger. Then the blue floral shawl I used when we went to the market together. I packed my brush, 3 pairs of socks, a small jar of cream, and finally, a photo. It was Matthew, asleep in my arms, his thumb in his mouth and his hair tangled like wires. The photo was a little bent at the corners, but it was still intact. That was the only memory I decided to take. Not for nostalgia, but to not forget that he once needed me. I left the house tidy, not for them, for me. I didn't want them to say I left a mess. I turned off the lights, checked the gas valves on the stove, folded the bathroom towel. In the kitchen, I turned on the kettle. I made chamomile tea and put 2 cups on the table, even though I knew only one was for me. A few minutes later, they came down. First Kevin, barefoot and half asleep, walking past without a glance. I made tea, I said. Thanks, he mumbled without stopping, and then added, I'm running late. Can you help me find my backpack? I can't, son. I'm about to leave. He stopped, frowning. Leave? Where are you going? I'm going to stay with Diane for a few days, in Silver Pines. I'm going to rest a bit. Why? He said, as if I were talking about a foreign country. Because I want to, because I can, and because I need to. Kevin just said, oh, rubbed his face, and continued on his way to the laundry room. Then Jessica came down. Dark glasses, light makeup, dark circles covered with foundation. She was talking on the phone with someone. Yeah, I'll call you back. The house is awake now, she said before hanging up. She looked at me and said, going on a trip? No, I'm going to live in the country for a few days. Help in the garden, breathe some clean air. Jessica adjusted her glasses and said to Matthew, who was coming down the stairs, your grandma's going on a little vacation. She needed some air, right? Matthew didn't even look at her. With his phone in his hand, he plopped into a chair. Are you taking the charger, Grandma? He asked, without taking his eyes off the screen. I don't need it, honey. Where I'm going, you don't need to be connected. Just awake. I finished my tea. I washed my cup. I dried it and put it away. Not out of kindness, for closure. Before I left, I stood by the door. I don't know when I'll be back. But if I do come back, it will be because I want to, not because I'm expected. Take all the time you need. Kevin said, already looking for his car keys. I will, I replied. I left without any drama. No one hugged me. No one said, we're going to miss you. And that, instead of hurting me, was a relief. At the station, I bought a one-way ticket. I didn't need to know when I was coming back. Maybe never. The train left on time. I sat by the window. The car was half empty. I rested my head and let the landscapes peel the past away from me. I didn't cry, not a single tear. What I felt wasn't sadness. It was lightness, like taking off an apron after years. Silver Pines was just as I imagined, quiet, silent, with the smell of damp earth. Diane was waiting for me at the station with a tired but sincere smile. You look different, she said. I feel different, I answered. The house was surrounded by tall pines and wildflowers. It had no fence, no doorbell, just a wooden door and a mossy roof. When I walked in, the first thing I noticed was the silence. A complete, clean silence, with no background TV, no vibrating cell phones, just the creak of the wooden floor and the smell of fresh soup. Diane took me to the guest room. A simple bed, a thick blanket, an open window. Eat something and then rest. There's no rush here. In the dining room, there was a bowl of lentil soup and bread with cheese, warm, simple, served with calm. That night, I went to bed with no noise, no obligations, no fear. I put my picture of Matthew on the nightstand, turned off the light, and slept. I slept without waking up startled, without being on alert in case someone needed me. The next day, before the sun came up, I walked through the garden. I bent down, worked the soil, pulled out dead leaves. I felt the dirt under my nails again, the sweat on my forehead. But this time, it wasn't out of obligation. It was for pleasure. Diane came with a hot cup. She put it in my hands. No one here expects you to do more than you want to, she told me. Then, I'm in the right place. And that's how I knew. That day, for the first time, I didn't serve anyone. That day, for the first time, I was myself. A woman also blossoms when she stops asking for permission. Peter called me a few days later. His voice sounded the same as always, calm, firm, with that tone only used by men who have seen too much of the ugly side of families. Everything is ready. I've summoned them for Thursday, at 10. All three will be there. I was in the kitchen, peeling zucchini. My hand trembled a little, but I didn't say anything. I didn't need to be present to say what I had to say. I had already written it. Every word with the blood that you can't see, but that has weight. That day, Peter called me again at sunset. They came, on time, though with long faces. He told me how it all went. Jessica arrived first, in high heels and dark glasses, as if she were walking into a television interview. Kevin behind her, more hunched over than usual, as if he knew something was coming that he didn't want to hear. Matthew, headphones on, staring at his phone, completely oblivious. Peter had them come into a small conference room. There were dark leather chairs, a solid wood table, and a thick envelope on top. They sat down without asking too many questions. Thank you for coming. This meeting is to read a letter, Peter said. A letter written by Mrs. Maria Sanchez. Jessica raised an eyebrow. A letter. You called us in for that. Peter didn't answer. He just opened the envelope, took out the 3 folded pages, and began to read in a clear voice. To those who mistook my silence for resignation, I didn't leave. I just stopped waiting. Matthew turned down the volume on his phone. Kevin stopped looking at the floor. Jessica shifted in her chair. For years, I sat at your table. I cooked, I cleaned, I cared. And you spoke to me as if I were the shadow of a memory. You pushed me to the margins, then into the water. And still, you thought I would say nothing. But this is my voice. And it is mine alone. Peter observed them. None of them spoke. Kevin, my son, you chose silence because it was easier than making your wife uncomfortable. Matthew, you made fun of me. You recorded me, and you thought it was funny. Jessica, you erased me from your narrative, from your plans, from your home. Then Peter paused. So far, so good, he said. But now comes the part you need to listen to carefully. He took out a second document. It was the new will. He placed it in front of them. Mrs. Sanchez has changed everything. The house, the savings, the accounts. None of it belongs to you anymore. Kevin leaned forward. What are you saying? Peter looked at him steadily. That there was never a legal transfer. The house is still in your mother's name. She has decided to donate it to a foundation that helps elderly women in situations of violence. Jessica slammed her hand on the table. That's ridiculous. She can't do that without consulting us. Peter didn't flinch. Of course she can. It is her will. She had it registered and signed before a notary, and you who lived with her under that roof should know that you never listened to her. Matthew mumbled. And the money. Peter showed him another paper. It was transferred to a charitable organization. Maria made it clear that she wanted every dollar to go to people who know how to say thank you. Jessica shot up from her chair. This is revenge. It's cruel. Peter handed her a copy of the letter. Cruel. What was cruel was ignoring her while she served breakfast, while she washed her dishes, while she was drowning in the lake. This letter isn't revenge, it's quiet justice. Matthew put his phone away. Peter took out one more, smaller envelope. He handed it to him. Your grandmother asked that this be only for you. Matthew opened it. Inside was an old photo. Him, as a child, asleep in my arms. On the back, a sentence written by hand. It wasn't your fault you grew up this way. But it will be your decision what kind of man you choose to become. Matthew read it twice. He said nothing. He just put it in his pocket. Jessica stormed out in a fury. Kevin remained seated for another moment, speechless. Finally, he just whispered, "Where is my mother?" Peter replied, "In a place where they finally call her by her name, not the lady, not Grandma, Maria." Peter told me all of this in a long phone call. While he spoke, I looked at my basil plants in the garden. I didn't feel pride, nor sadness, just a new kind of peace, like when the first rain falls after a long drought. That same weekend, Diane showed me some messages Jessica had sent her. Pleas, excuses, even veiled threats. Diane didn't reply. She just told me, "It's not your burden anymore, Maria. You let it go. You set it free. That's more than courage. It's self-love." I nodded. Deep down, I knew she was right. The news spread through the old neighborhood that Jessica had lost her job, that Kevin's family was having financial problems, that Matthew dropped out of college. No one called me directly, but I heard that all three of them were asking about me. They wanted to know if I would come back. If I regretted it, the answer was no, because I was writing another letter, not for them, for me. Today I planted seeds with my own hands, without waiting for applause, without asking for permission. I look in the mirror and I see someone who was born again without having to die first. And that is truly a new beginning. The dawn was wrapped in mist. The air smelled of damp earth and pine resin. I put on my gardening gloves, the ones Frank gave me for some random anniversary, which were still holding up even though the seams were starting to give. I grabbed the hoe with both hands and headed to the back garden bed. The earth was still damp from last night's rain. My muscles ached, but it wasn't a bad ache, that it was the kind that reminds you you're alive. "Did you sleep well?" asked Esmeralda, sitting on her little stool, knitting under the big tree. "I slept without any disturbances," I replied, "and that's saying a lot. They say that those who sleep in peace have let go of what doesn't belong to them. And you've let go, haven't you?" I didn't answer, but yes, I had let it all go. Everything. 2 afternoons later, while I was pulling some weeds by the wooden fence, I heard the screech of a truck braking on the gravel. I looked up. A female figure got out of the car. Disheveled hair, sunglasses, hanging from her neck, a tired face. Jessica. She approached the gate, the one we always keep closed with a thick latch from the inside. She pushed, but it didn't budge. "Maria," she shouted, "please, open up. I just want to talk." I stayed where I was, the OA in my hand. She clung to the wooden bars, as if the cold of the metal was bringing her back to reality. "Is that it? You're just going to hide here, after everything we've been through?" I saw Diane peek out from the doorway. She said nothing, just crossed her arms and watched. "I'm not hiding," I said without raising my voice. "I'm where I belong." Jessica swallowed, looked down, and then knelt. Her voice was no longer haughty. "I know I failed. I know I spoke badly. I acted worse. But I didn't think you would go this far." "Far," I interrupted. "Far was when you pushed me into the water. Far was when you said this house was in your way. Far was every time you pretended I didn't exist." She fell silent. The wind blew, lifting dry leaves around her. "It's just that," she whispered, "I didn't know how much it hurt until you weren't there. That's called ego, not love. What hurts you isn't my absence. It's losing what you took for granted." "No, it's not like that, Jessica," I interrupted her with a firm voice. I embraced you like a daughter when you had no family nearby. I cared for you in silence. But you all confused care with servitude." She covered her face with her hands. "I'm not asking you to give anything back. Just a chance. Chances are given when the heart still has room. Mine no longer holds grudges. But it also has no space for what hurts." Diane approached her, placing a hand on her shoulder, not with compassion, but with the gesture you give to those who have already heard what they needed to hear. "Come on, dear. If you really want to change, don't start by asking for forgiveness. Start by being silent." Jessica got up. She didn't say anything else. She just walked back to her car with her shoulders slumped. I returned to the earth. I sat on the stone step, took my notebook, and wrote, "Chosen solitude isn't abandonment, it's salvation." Sometimes, letting go is also a form of self-care. That night, Diane brought me a folded newspaper page. On the front of the society section was a photo. Women smiling, flour on their aprons, lining up in front of a community kitchen. "Your donation helped set up that bakery," she told me. "Look at the eyes of those women. Do you see that light?" I nodded. "That light isn't caused by money. It's caused by being seen." I, too, once needed someone to look at me with that kind of respect. "I wasn't the one who saved them," I said. "I just removed a stone from their path." Diane smiled, sitting down next to me. "And that's enough." That same night, I wrote a letter, but it wasn't addressed to Kevin, or Jessica, or even Matthew. It was for me. "Dear Maria, for years, you were silent so as not to inconvenience anyone, for fear of being left alone. Today, you are alone. Yes, but you are free. You were not weak. You were patient. You were not a victim. You were a root. And finally, you chose to blossom for yourself." I tucked it between the pages of the notebook, where I also had recipe clippings, stray thoughts, and a drawing Matthew once gave me. I poured myself a cup of bougainvillea tea, took it to the porch, and sat in the wicker chair. The pines rustled softly in the wind. No cell phone vibrated. No one shouted my name. I didn't have to prepare dinner for anyone, and I didn't expect anyone to say thank you. And yet, inside, I felt that everything was in its place. I stayed there for a good while, watching the sun hide behind the tall branches. The steam from the tea rose slowly, as if it, too, wanted to stay with me a little longer. In the distance, I could hear crickets, and the soft creak of the tin roof, warmed by the day. I didn't feel nostalgia. I didn't miss anything. Instead, I understood that the love you give also has the right to be taken back when it is no longer welcome. I stood up, I went inside and turned off the hallway light. The silence embraced me like an old shawl, knitted with calm. And for the first time in many years, my back didn't ache from carrying what wasn't mine. Tomorrow, I will plant basil. We tell this story based on real events. The names and places have been changed to protect the identity of the person involved. It is the story of a mother who sacrificed her entire life for her children and grandchildren, and in the end was despised, used, and abandoned. But when she had nothing left to lose, she rose up, and this time, she lived for herself. We don't tell it to judge, but so that whoever is listening might stop and think, how many mothers are suffering in silence inside their own homes? Now, I'm curious about you, the one listening to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever experienced something similar? Let me know in the comments. In the meantime, I'll leave 2 other stories on the final screen that are favorites on the channel, and that will surely surprise you. Thank you for staying until the end.